Enter in front of Tyson's office. When he saw the two of them, Manager Zhu was waiting inside and immediately approached and bowed to greet him. The director invited him in. Mr. Zhou happily asked, Manager Yu and Manager Zhang, are you in there? The girl, standing straight and a bit shy, replied, please wait a moment. Without letting department head Zhu come in and talk to Tyson, Director Zhou happily called into Director Zhang Tyson's office. Director Zhang, I'm here. Tyson saw that the person had been brought there. He happily raised his hand to greet him. Please, I've been waiting all this time. On the contrary, when Ha Huanwu saw a young person like Tyson who was the director, he was surprised and thought, what is this? Is this young man Director Zhang? Mr. Zhou saw that Huanwu was a little confused and worried, hesitant to say hello, so he reminded him, Huanwu, say hello, this is Director Zhang Tyson, your future depends on him. Hearing that, Huanwu didn't hesitate any longer and went up to say hello. He said, hello sir, I am Ha Huanwu, thank you for giving me the opportunity to interview. Tyson was a bit polite and denied, no, I have to thank you for coming here, let's sit together. And in his head, Huanwu was silently assessing Tyson, saying, he's more mature than his age, I thought he'd never worked before. Then, Manager Zhu immediately brought D to serve the guests. Everyone was still a bit shy at this point, so no one said anything. To relieve the awkward atmosphere, Mr. Zhou spoke first. He asked Tyson, Director Zhang. Have you read his profile? Oh, I have, Tyson replied. How do you feel about him? Director Zhou asked Tyson with an expectant expression. Tyson also did not hide anything and expressed that he felt like an exemplary prostitute of the Korean industry. Huanwu next to him heard that and was confused and thought, have I reached that point? Mr. Zhou immediately chimed in, that's right, my friend is like a historical witness of Daewon, I guarantee it, and then both of them laughed awkwardly. Ha Huanwu could only rub his head and scratch his ears and say, you said too much. Suddenly Tyson firmly said, I agree, making Huanwu gasp in surprise and say, what way? Tyson seemed extremely determined with his decision and then calmly explained that I trust lawyer Zhou more than my brothers in the family. The person he nominated did not need to ask much. When he saw that Huanwu would most likely implicate him, Mr. Zhou was also shy and turned to Huanwu. Huanwu, please devote yourself to Director Zhang. If you make a mistake, I will be dead, haha. Although it was a bit hard to believe, Ha Huanwu did not doubt much and told Tyson that I will try my best to support you. Tyson heard this and thought for a while. Then he immediately handed over the main job to Huanwu. He said, you should manage the merger team on the 10th floor. Mr. Ha confusedly asked clearly, is it the merger team? How is that possible? Tyson's eyes were filled with both trust and expectation in the person sitting in front of him and seriously said, I appoint you as department head and CEO of the company. After so many years of working, Ha Huanwu seemed to see hope for a successful career in the near future and emotionally said, thank you. After saying that, he asked his grandfather, did you work at Daewon for a long time? He immediately replied, yes, I worked at Daewon for 26 years. Tyson seemed to be thinking of something and expressed his opinion that, personally, I really like Daewon's people, the technique of creating oil with bare hands is very outstanding. While Huan received a disguised compliment from him and shyly said, you're too cool, word. Then Tyson aggressively requested to Huanwu's surprise, please recruit someone from Daewon to the company. I need talented people with ambition, he said firmly. Ha Huanwu couldn't understand Tyson's meaning at that time but confusedly asked. What do you mean, the talent merger team? He added again, it seems like Lawyer Zhou hasn't said anything to you yet. Lawyer Zhou heard that and didn't deny it, then said, what's so interesting about saying it first? Ha Huanwu seemed to have implicitly understood something and stammered in a low voice, after all, are you planning to merge the business? As Anna Group, your words were like a lightning strike in Ha Huanwu's ears. The lawyer didn't want to hide anything and explained that our law firm also belonged to Mr. Zhang, making Huanwu shocked again. Lawyer Zhou seemed to find benefits, smiled evilly and told his friend, please buy alcohol regularly as promised. He seemed to have realized something else, thoughts popped into his head, what if I could run the whole company? Suddenly he knelt down on the ground. Ha Huanwu aggressively declared to Tyson in the presence of his friend, I will use my life to serve you, Director Zhang. This one word made Tyson feel much more secure and then exclaimed, very good, Director Ha Huanwu. Thank you Director Zhang. Mr. Zhou also sincerely thanks Tyson on behalf of his best friend. He politely replied, nothing, I should thank you for recommending talented people to me. Mr. Zhou happily replied, haha it's nothing. Tyson immediately changed the subject to break the awkward atmosphere. He asked, I heard that they were arrested by the police, how did that happen? Mr. Zhou immediately thought, are they hired killers? Those guys are really bastards, one of them committed suicide, the other two remained silent. It seemed like they had already dealt with each other. Tyson seemed to have figured something out and asked, are they of Chinese nationality? But this time, you were wrong, Mr. Zhou immediately reaffirmed, I have confirmed with the Chinese embassy and the local police agency, they do not have nationality. Can you guess who was behind it or where? Could it be the Ana Group? Mr. Joe asked suspiciously. Tyson now seemed to have given himself the answer and then told lawyer Joe that it was not the Ana Group. It seemed like another enemy, Mr. Joe immediately asked clearly, another enemy. He seemed to understand the situation Tyson was going through and couldn't help but exclaim, wow, your life is really scary, Director Zhang. Tyson is truly a gentle person who gets into trouble and complains. That's right, he wants life is very peaceful but life is very miserable. You have enemies beyond your years. I can't be jealous of this case, huh? Lawyer Joe said with a smile. Tyson did not hesitate to answer happily, my enemy is also yours, haha. That's right, I have to live a gentle life. Anna is tired alone now and there are these hired killers. I still want to live to be 100 years old but there are so many things to go through. The end of the conversation is when the sun has already set. At night, when the moon was as full as a full moon day, the city was lit up everywhere. Bright moonlight crept into someone's private house in the city. There is a man currently sitting thoughtfully in the office. Look closely at the photos of stateless hired killers on the table for a while. He had some doubts in his mind and then secretly thought that this is not an ordinary fist-fighting talent. Something is very strange. Having said that, he immediately picked up the mouse and searched for information on the computer. He looked at the stock and stock charts and silently affirmed. Your father is much better than you think. Because I was the youngest daughter, my father took care of me a lot. As he thought, the image of a girl appeared in his mind, which was Tyson's mother. The man read Tyson's documents and had to admire that he had studied law at a Korean university and had a knack for investing. Looking at the pictures of the group of people being beaten by Tyson, he said, well, they still know how to fight, but what should we do? The money you guys saved is all for the Jew family. He seemed to be planning something in his heart and then blurted out a sentence, I will put it to good use, haha. The scene changes to another place. Cigarette smoke is now flying blindly in the darkness. Han Dongchul held a cigarette in his hand while smoking while cursing and blushing. He wore a bathing suit, sat on a chair, smoked a cigarette and exclaimed, this position is life. He remembered the phone call that had just taken place not long ago. At that time he had failed in an assigned mission and had to beg the chairman, Chairman Zhu, I have failed. Please kill me, go, I've sent some capable guys but I still can't handle it thoroughly. But unexpectedly, the president did not blame him but consoled him, oh my god, why is this happening? Life is not all smooth sailing. Be careful not to let any rumor spread, that's it. Even though this sentence made him a little confused, he still didn't forget to say, Chairman, I will definitely not forget your favor. The chairman also added that the money he received before could be considered as an allowance. Hearing that, he felt more secure and immediately said, thank you, sir. Thinking back, he tilted his head back, closed his eyes, and smoked a cigarette, thinking about what had just happened. President Zhu's failure also earned him 300 million. A second later, he opened his eyes in surprise as if he had suspected that there must be some relationship between Zhang Heisen and President Zhu. Thinking of the benefits in this matter, he secretly rejoiced. If he did this well, he would also earn some money, haha. Having sat on the chair for too long, he stood up and lamented that he had to pee too much. After walking a few steps, he silently calculated in his heart that he would earn exactly 300 million and then leave this puddle right away. Not only did he sing while peeing, but he also plotted Zhang Heisen's plans. He told himself that he must find a gunman too, no matter how excellent that Zhang Heisen is. He only needs one shot, just a gun to the head and I'm gone, haha. He now felt that his plan was very good, so he leisurely said, Chairman, just wait for me. Suddenly, without knowing why, someone broke into his house, then hit his head against the wall. Blood was pouring, the wooden wall cracked, and he didn't know anything and could only scream, made a gurgling sound after being beaten. His head was pinned against the wall, but he still stubbornly refused to ask for forgiveness and instead cursed, who the hell is this damn bastard? Hearing that, the other person acted even harder, directly hitting his head straight against the wall, causing him to not have time to react and scream out loud. After the other person pressed his head, he whispered softly, doesn't this bastard know how scary the world is? And he couldn't answer but could only groan in pain. Saying that, that person with just one move, knocked his arm straight and fell flat on the ground, blood splattering. He was beaten so painfully that his eyes went wide and his neck was tilted, his mouth gaped open and he vomited a mouthful of fresh blood. Not only that, the other person had no intention of forgiving him, used his foot to stomp his head hard into the urine he had just peed. The jawbone made a cracking sound as if it had been broken, the blood vessels in his eyes were thick as if they were about to pop out, eyes out. That person is none other than Zhang Tae-sun, he said with a murderous aura, what you just spit out, you should hide it yourself. Tae-sun looked at him yawning and was about to die and said, Zhang Dongchul, this life is yours. As soon as his words ended, he died in humiliation, died before he had even earned the money he wanted, just expected. The entire night sky seemed to be tinged with bright red blood, exposed under the illumination of the moonlight. The next day, when the sun was early in the morning, rays of sunlight streamed into Tae-sun's room through the window. Notifications were continuously spammed that karma points had been added, karma points had been added, karma points had been added. Tae-sun had just woken up and heard the disturbing notification and immediately complained. He had already received buff points in the morning. He sat up and looked out the window at the city. Seeing the pleasant atmosphere, he exclaimed. It was already spring. Tae-sun looked into the distance and said with peace of mind, yes, Ao's matter would probably be resolved soon. A while after he woke up, he got out of bed, calmly put his hand behind his pants and scratched. Then walked towards the glass door and lamented, you two are so lonely, whoever hears this will think he loves her, bottomless greed. Tae-sun smiled and looked at the city and reasoned, but after regression, what can he do if his opinion changes? He thought about the girls he knew and exclaimed that he had quite a few ambiguous relationships. But only his feelings for Clara were closest to love. Suddenly, a memory appeared in his mind, that one night he and Clara shared a kiss in the rain. Very quickly, Jang Tae-sun ran to the company to work. Sitting in the office, Tae-sun asked the person in front of him, Director Lee, how the work was going. He seemed to have done a good job, so he smiled and talked happily. Thanks to the chairman's comprehensive instructions, the work was proceeding smoothly. Hearing that, Tae-sun was also happy and smiled, but in his heart he secretly thought, even though he told me to call him something else, he still called me president. Then Mr. Lee immediately reported that Anna Group's business department is aiming for the criteria of trust, respect, innovation, three intersecting circles to pursue continuous change and global growth. Not only that, he also learned more and told Tae-sun, Anna Life, Anna Casualty Insurance, Anna Technology Finance, Anna Bank, Anna Securities Investment. The first part is the Financial Management Department, Anna's Property Manager. Tae-sun silently exclaimed upon hearing that, the report is more interesting than I thought. Mr. Lee added that the core of part 2 is Anna Joint Stock Company, mainly developing in the trading segment, including Anna Construction and Anna Chemistry. Jang Tae-sun got tired of hearing so much Anna, then looked surprised and said, oh, is that so? Not only that, he also learned, finally, the shopping center entertainment service department specializing in branded goods, including Anna Galaxy, Anna Resort, and Anna Development. This service department is quite comprehensive. Director Lee suddenly became more serious and said, currently a purchasing team for these three departments has been established. To acquire Anna Group, a large number of shares are required. According to what I have briefly learned, the unit price of their shares has decreased significantly due to short selling by foreign funds. He also knows what Anna Company is planning, he continued. They are taking advantage of public opinion as well as world financial risks. It can be seen that they want to actively promote mergers and acquisitions. While the young man Jang Tae-sun listened to the long series, he felt very respectful of him and thought to himself, in such a short time, he had learned so much. He seemed to be thinking about something and then calmly said, as a result, foreign capital held 45% of the shares of Anna Joint Stock Company, the core of Anna Group. Hearing that, Tae-sun seemed to grasp the opportunity and happily said that if that was true, the center of the cycle would have been cut off. But on the contrary, the director looked somewhat worried and said, yes, that's true, Con. Anna Joint Stock Company is the core of Anna Group. There's also quite a bit of Chairman Oh Sung-hyuk's personal stake in it, he said seriously. Along with his own worries, he frankly asked Tae-sun, Mr. Chairman, I ask this a bit frankly, but how many shares do you hold? Tae-sun was a bit surprised and asked in return, are the shares guaranteed? While letting him think, he continued, he must have let foreign capitalists take over the business. The CEO worriedly told Tae-sun that if we did not cooperate with them, the acquisition would not be possible. Jang Tae-sun saw that and immediately gave a solid guarantee, don't worry, we will buy it all back. Hearing that, he couldn't believe his ears and then panicked and said, what, buy it all back? Tae-sun immediately assigned Mr. Lee the task of preparing the car purchasing team, making him even more surprised and asked again, what, the car purchasing team? He seemed to know the future and said confidently that the Woong building will soon be sold. Tae-sun continued seriously, giving me another purchasing team. This statement once again made the CEO even more surprised. Tae-sun calmly asked, why are you so surprised, causing him to confusedly answer, Chairman, me. With a determined look, everything seemed to have been calculated in his mind. He said a rather confusing sentence, the joy of shopping is not buying one, getting one free. Scene change, to a villa on a green beach with flying seagulls. Entering the room, there was a girl sitting next to the melodious music playing, the memory of the moonlight shining on people's faces. I still remember. I have to wait for the sun. The singing echoed, and the girl just sat down to relieve her mood. Music is like a medicine to heal, but at this moment her tears were indifferent, as if the girl's mood at that moment had been described in the lyrics of the song. She sat in self-pity, remembering someone, without holding back. Okay, name it, Daniel. At the airport, after Jo Yoontae and Tae-sun got off the plane, lawyer Jo said, now I'm really happy. Tae-sun wondered and politely asked, it seems like this is your first time on a plane, right? You're not a kid, okay? When Lawyer Joe heard that, he immediately objected. What are you talking about? You're not a child, so why are you flying on a plane? If you're a student, why would you skip class? Tae-sun smiled and looked at the lawyer and replied, I was exempted from that class. Jo Yoon-tae was surprised and suddenly asked again, what, you're exempt? Where could there be such a good thing? The male lead happily continued, that's right, that good thing is here. After walking a while, Tae-sun saw Robert and two bodyguards wearing large black suits appear right in front of him. Lawyer Joe also saw them and was worried, panicked and stammered, asking, who are those people? Tae-sun naturally introduced both sides to them. Hello Robert, let me introduce you too, this person is Jo Yoon-tae, the lawyer in charge of the Korean legal department. Robert smiled and extended his hand to greet, hello, I am Robert Ryan, director of the foreign partner company. Lawyer Joe politely replied, yes, I'm Lawyer Jo Yoon-tae, your thoughts are full of questions right now, Robert. The male lead was worried and looked at the two of them in confusion, what's wrong? You too. Jo Yoon-tae and Robert shook hands in embarrassment, sweating. Tae-sun confusedly asked the two of them, what are you doing? Are you okay? He thought, as if he had seen the superiority and defeat somewhere before. The two of them tried to shake each other's hands tightly, making them both tremble and groan inwardly. The boss was so miserable. In another part of the airport, a woman's voice said, the boss had reached a new target. The voice came from the phone. Are you sure? The woman replied, I received the file just now, so I asked for the information. The boss on the phone wondered what the roadmap was. A woman with black hair and black sunglasses was answering the phone. Apparently they were going abroad. Her boss gave orders over the phone, you've worked hard, you leave your position. The person on the phone continued to say that the next operation was expected to be handed over to the Bravo team. She replied, okay. While listening, I pulled my suitcase and walked out of the airport. Approaching a taxi, she opened the door and sat in the back seat of the taxi. The woman's mouth suddenly smiled full of mystery. Sitting in the taxi, the woman told the taxi driver, take me to Aten. Go back to the airport where Tae-sun is. Two female flight attendants walked up smiling and warmly greeted and welcomed the guests. The flight attendant next to me continued, I am truly honored to take on the role of welcoming VIP guests. Lawyer Joe glanced at Tae-sun and Robert in surprise, VIP guests. The two female flight attendants extended their hands to invite Tae-sun and the others. Please come this way, we have prepared a special gate for you. Jo Yoon-tae sweated with surprise and whispered in his heart, what, this welcoming ceremony? Is not what I prepared, could it be, is that Western guy's private plane? Lawyer Joe looked intently at Robert who was smiling and talking to Tae-sun with a serious look, thinking, what's the deal, he doesn't look like a scammer at all. Right after that, he immediately felt jealous, his heart was full of discomfort, it must be nice to rely on him being big, the guys from the A.T. security team are even more agile. How big is the private plane, but also prepare a private gate, what a waste, a waste. Then he told himself that he must protect Tae-sun, the treasure of his country. Robert comfortably talked to the male lead, the weather in Korea is really good. Tae-sun smiled and replied, next time you can arrange time, come here to visit. Lawyer Joe followed behind, looking at Robert and Tae-sun walking together, frowning and thinking uncomfortably, why do the two of them keep walking together? Anyone who looks at them can see that that guy is number two. The flight attendant pointed the way and said, please go this way. Tae-sun and the others also followed one after another. The two flight attendants bowed their heads, smiled, and said politely, wishing you a pleasant trip. Going out to the place where he was about to board the plane, Lawyer Joe was stunned. Huh? He stammered, panicked, and asked, oh, Rep. Chang, what is that? The male lead naturally replied, what's wrong, don't you see? Tae-sun said, it's a plane. Jo Yoon-tae was still panicked and said, no, that's not true. Who doesn't know about the plane? His eyes were still wide open with shock and surprise, not about that, I wanted to ask what that plane was. Tae-sun smiled and replied, probably. Then he pointed at the plane right in front of him, a large white plane but special in that the plane had Tae-sun's picture printed on it. He asked, that plane doesn't look like it belongs to Tae-sun, me, causing Lawyer Joe to panic and exclaim, what did you say? He was surprised and kept exclaiming, oh my god, this is 430, so similar to the one the King of Brunei bought in 2006. Suddenly, three beautiful hostesses appeared, three smiling girls happily welcomed you, it is our honor to serve you, we will serve you wholeheartedly, oh. Lawyer Joe was once again so surprised that he was stunned and could only say, ha. His sweat flowed continuously, his mouth was distorted and filled with disbelief as he thought, wishing to experience life at the age of 50, he stammered in response to the female flight attendants in front of him, hoping to see them, help. When the plane took off into the sky, Lawyer Joe was still full of voices in his heart. Tae-sun, I will hope everything for you. On the plane, looking out the window were clear blue clouds. Tae-sun and Robert were sitting across from each other at the table, they were seriously discussing work. Tae-sun asked, Robert, how is the management of funds for the election going? Robert replied, I have coordinated properly. He began to analyze and actively use super POC, and at the same time, according to Democratic congressmen, the Republican Party also classified necessary congressmen and was pouring political capital into many areas. The male lead wondered, didn't the main floor say anything? Robert calmly replied, I was promised that I would receive a pair of shoes as a reward. So they probably wanted to keep in touch until the re-election. Tyson seriously looked at the document and said, what about the results of the projects that were ordered? Robert still patiently answered, and had also established a few financial companies on his boss's orders, but it was difficult to find out information about intellectual property rights. He seriously analyzed that the classification of businesses with intellectual property rights through high-level recruitment companies had also stopped. The fields assigned by the boss were such as the internet, radiophone projects, mobile messenger, big data and electric cars are also being reviewed. Robert's face began to become worried, sweat gradually trickled down his cheeks, but it was difficult to give an answer about the patent and its future value. Tyson smiled confidently and said, so I have clearly defined the concept of the project. He calmly, with a confident look on his face, said that he just needs to get a patent or an investment company that matches the concept. Robert was surprised. What, the concept of the project? Tyson seriously said, we must occupy the market first in the near future after 2010, this is a project to expand 10 supertrends. The male lead's words made Robert confused and super trendy. Tyson is confident with his choice, saying, first his nanosensor devices and nano-internet connection device network. Robert exclaimed in surprise, what, a nanosensor device? The male protagonist slowly explains that the coming future will be an era where computers, cars, air conditioners, and mobile phones will be controlled by internet-connected devices. He sweated and replied confusedly, the phrase network of devices connected to the internet is also very special. The male protagonist said with sharp eyes that it was a device monitored and controlled by an artificial intelligence system, referred to as IAT. Then Tyson continued to analyze, secondly, clean energy is environmentally friendly. Robert still had that confused look and asked, what do you mean, boss, about solar energy? The male protagonist calmly replied, yes, the main target is solar energy, renewable energy, nuclear, and new generation batteries. He said with a concerned look, I had heard about it before, as far as I know is a large-scale energy storage system. Tyson sinisterly said that in the future, solar power will be the #1 type of electricity, and followed by nuclear, renewable energy, and technology will dominate this world. He affirmed that, 10 years later, the panel rate will exceed 30%. Robert was startled and admiring and could only exclaim, the male lead continued to say that the production price per watt will be more competitive than electricity production using fossil fuels. Tyson seriously said, before then we must have the technique first. Robert just listened and answered repeatedly, yes, I understand. The male lead was still attentively discussing future directions, followed by self-driving cars, which I've already told him about. He immediately replied that I had already bought several patents in this field according to my boss's instructions. The male lead praised him and said he did a great job. Tyson's eyes were as sharp as a god of war in the field of joint ventures, he said, and next was something related to the fourth industrial revolution and artificial intelligence. Robert was even more shocked, surprised, the fourth industrial revolution. The male protagonist seriously explains that if the internet and computers are the main models of the third revolution, then this fourth revolution will begin with artificial intelligence. He keeps talking about what will happen in the future, who will be at first, gradually who will be weaker, become more advanced and develop into who will be strong, also known as Aji. Robert stammered, boss. Tyson replied confusedly, what's going on? He worriedly said, are you a god, or are you the one who sees the future? He smiled wryly as if he didn't understand, but suddenly he said that. Robert began to explain his own thoughts. The boss's knowledge until now I had not heard or seen. I was very surprised when the boss was very sure about information related to foreign exchange and legal contracts, future community, but I didn't expect my boss to understand the scientific technology of the future so well. The male lead said with a gesture, Robert, I wonder if you still remember what I said before. Robert replied, is it about mystical stories in the East? Tyson thought to himself. At times like this we have to bring out mysticism. He twisted his mouth and forced himself to lie. Where I used to live they called human small universes. He was surprised. Why? Robert sweated, confused and said with a shy look, I had studied many subjects in college but... Tyson interrupted and said, Eastern people have learned that their unique spiritual thinking about the universe is more profound than others, and the microcosm originates from such thinking. Robert couldn't believe it but still tried to answer, yes. The male lead smiled and kept explaining to the other person. The pioneer said that if you want to understand the universe, you must understand yourself first. His expression was full of complacency. Since I was a child, I had asked many questions about my existence, and one day I finally got the answer. Robert still had an incredulous expression, confused and asked, so what is the solution? Tyson calmly and arrogantly replied, I have received supernatural energy, a superpower. Robert looked surprised and suddenly said, "Superpowers." Tyson said with a confident look, "I have the ability to somewhat predict investments," making Mr. Robert sitting across from him sweat unbelievably. "Ah. You still twist your mouth and ludge, don't find out anymore, if you reveal the secret. Robert and I will both be in danger." Robert silently thought in his heart, it seemed like something was wrong, but out of his mouth he still calmly replied to the male lead, I understand." He secretly speculated that something was wrong with him, he didn't look very healthy. Suddenly, Lawyer Joe's voice dispelled the awkward atmosphere. "Representative Jang, don't leave me alone." Joe Yunti's words surprised Tyson. "If I die and become a ghost, I will only follow you alone." The male lead smiled happily and asked, "Do you like this plane that much?" Lawyer Joe calmly replied with joy and satisfaction, "Of course he liked it, if I lied I would be a dog." At this time, the 3 female flight attendants on the plane were gathered around Lawyer Joe. He looked like he was enjoying this joy very much, excitedly saying, "This place is truly a paradise on earth, it's really wonderful, absolutely number one." Tyson helplessly advised, "It's almost there now, you should quickly prepare to go down." "Stop tomorrow." Robert saw this scene and was helpless to say a word. A hostess with red hair warmly turned and said to Lawyer Joe, "I'm very happy to be here with you." He laughed loudly and replied, "Let's see you guys tonight." The flight attendant replied, "Okay." Joe Yunte is happy and joyful. "Oh, thank you, thank you." Once the plane landed on the ground, the surroundings were now stretching lawns and trees. Added to that is the sunlight, creating a scene full of quiet and peace. The male lead sat in the car, looked out the door along the way and suddenly smiled. Robert spoke up and said, Going farther than I thought, I'm afraid you're a little tired." "Oh well, why waste energy like that?" Tyson wondered and turned to ask Robert, "Is this place Napa Valley?" He replied, "Yes. That's right, this is a famous place among California wine producers." Then he turned to look at the male lead and began telling the story. "Moreover, this place also has legend about a fairy who protects small wine." Makes Tyson curious. "Fairy?" The male lead asked Robert. "He seems to know this place very well." Robert happily and confidently boasted that my ancestor was the owner of an early American winery. He suddenly exclaimed, "Wow, is that true?" Robert kept talking to Tyson in the annoyance and hostility of Lawyer Joe. "During the gold rush, my great-grandfather migrated here from England, then he improved the land and planted grapes." The male lead smiled and asked again, "If he owned a winery, he would probably accumulate a lot of wealth." Robert frowned, his expression darkened and replied, "It's true that my family had a lot of wealth at that time, but during my great-grandfather's time, my family was in terrible trouble because there was a disease in the vines, called the bug pandemic." Tyson was surprised and immediately realized that if it was phylloxera, he silently said in his mind, it was a terrible infectious disease also known as the plague of grapes. His eyes were filled with sadness and regret. Fortunately, he was also revived, but during my grandfather's time, a law was issued prohibiting alcohol. Robert kept talking about his family, "So my family was extremely miserable." Tyson also realizes, well, the law prohibits alcohol. His face now grimaced, sadly telling me that my late father left behind a will like this. He told me to go find my ancestor's winery to relieve his resentment. The male lead suddenly replied, "So, could it be that this is the place?" Robert immediately changed his face, smiled and replied, "Yes, that's right, from now on this place will be owned by the representative." Tyson sympathized but could only call out, "Robert." Lawyer Joe's eyes were full of confusion. He glanced at the two of them and said, "Rep. Jang, I'm really wondering, my English is limited so there are some things I don't understand." Tyson asked again, "What's going on?" Joe Yunt immediately asked, "Why is this place owned by Jang's representative?" He glanced at Nam 9 full of suspicion and scrutiny. "Could it be that you were trying to invest in America without telling me? Also, that Mr. Robert, what's going on?" Tyson thought to himself, "Naughty, he must be crazy curious. Actually, even Robert doesn't know exactly about his assets." He smiled slightly and replied to Lawyer Joe, "I'm an investment advisor so I only get a part, and I also have a little investment capital abroad." Tyson reminds himself, sometimes knowing too much is harmful. Hearing that, Lawyer Joe had no doubts but happily exclaimed, "Oh, it's really Jang's representative, it's a terrible investment." Tyson silently said in his heart that it seemed like Lawyer Joe had already overlooked this issue. After a while of driving, Robert announced his arrival. Step by step get out of the car. Before their eyes was a huge and extremely luxurious building. Others exclaimed in surprise, "Wow, my God, wow, wonderful." Joe Yunt held out his hand and said, "I personally prepared this place, what do you two think?" Robert and Tyson both gave their thumbs up to show their satisfaction and replied, "Perfect." Evening at the hotel they rented. A solemn party took place. Surrounded by bustling waiters and servants. The male lead stood from a high floor looking down and remembered his family. "Everyone from everywhere comes here, I also have to bring my parents here once." Then he relaxed and enjoyed saying, "I remember there is a sad violin song that fits this atmosphere very well." Suddenly a sound caught his attention. "Huh?" He turned his head to look towards the door and wondered, what was that sound? There was no one here, how could I hear that sound? Thinking about it, Tyson sweated and was scared, his lips pursed tightly. He went to open a door. Follow the sound, look around while walking, thinking, what is this sound? Tyson continued to move forward. Then he went down the stairs again. Coming to a large door, I opened it and thought, this place seems to be a basement warehouse. Step inside the room behind that huge door. Tyson looked around and guessed for himself, as expected, it was vintage style. He took a few more steps and saw a strange shadow. He looked up in surprise and disbelief. The person trembled slightly and then spoke, what is that? Right now outside the hotel, the moon in the sky was bright and round. A mysterious person used binoculars to look in the direction of the hotel and said that the new boss and target had arrived. The response to that statement is the question, is there any change? The man holding the binoculars still observed and replied, there was no movement at the winery, the other voice said, continue to monitor, the guard is very strict so don't reveal your location. The man mumbled and complied, it was clear. The man stood watching from the mountain and wondered, what is the goal this time, who is this kid to pay so much attention to? Then he smiled meaningfully and said, at the end of this mission, I have to go on a date with Rachel, the pressure piled up makes me want to explode. Back inside the hotel, also known as the winery, a strange person's voice said, Merlot, wake up quickly, it's time to work, are you really like this, just sleeping that's right, you'll rot if you keep going like that. Tyson was surprised and stunned but could only utter the word, ah. The voice in front of the male lead still hasn't stopped, it's been 7 years, why are you so sad, you're a masterpiece with a strong flavor. A man with golden hair said, turning his back to the male lead, sometimes emitting a spicy scent that also has charm, don't you know, although the Cabernet kids after Vignon are the most prominent in this area, but you are the most special. That man kept on admiring something in the wine barrels, quickly create lovely bubbles. I'll be very happy if you make a burrow wrong sound. Tyson suddenly looked at the man in front of him with strange clothes from the past standing in the air and thought, what is that old man? He looked down at his feet and confirmed in his heart that he was not human. The male lead stared wide-eyed and speculated that he was not a god, if so. That man turned his back and looked at Tyson with white, bright eyes, making the male lead think, is it a ghost? Tyson had to cover his eyes with his hands and exclaim in his heart, oh my god, the old man's phosphorescence is no joke. The old man suddenly came closer and pressed Tyson's face, making him surprised and panicked. He asked, did you see me? The male lead was scared, trembling, stammering and replied, no, I don't see it anymore. The cotton man was happy and cheerfully said, oh, you see me. Tyson looked at the man in front of him in panic and thought, I'm not afraid of gods. But I'm a bit afraid, I don't have the confidence to defeat ghosts, at this moment. The older brother uttered the words, ah. Then the male lead immediately pretended to turn his head the other way, sweating profusely. Nervously saying, here, it's the basement so it's a bit cold, right? Tyson immediately turned around and left, still trying to pretend he couldn't see the man in front of him. Wine, you've worked hard, you need a lot of patience but the taste will definitely be great. The old man immediately said to investigate and check him. There was a gold coin at his feet, causing Tyson to immediately react and look down at the ground to search and ask, what, where? Then he suddenly realized something was wrong, his face contorted, confused, DM, I'm hooked. The man quickly jumped closer, excitedly saying hello, young man. Tyson forcefully replied, yes, hello. The male lead smiled awkwardly and asked, not knowing who he was. The old man was surprised with a surprised gesture. What, you don't know me, the kids here call me. The male lead interrupted, is he the wine fairy? The man marveled, oh, so you know. The old man proudly said loudly, that's right, I am that wine fairy. Tyson thought helplessly, even his smile was casual. Tyson thought doubtfully, but aren't most fairies cute and pretty like children? He smiled and replied, yes. The male lead looked at the fairy right in front of him with suspicion, and an ancestor with a tomato red nose like this, he looked like a ghost. Tyson began to question the abilities of the man in front of him. Oh, by the way, so this wine fairy, what ability does he possess? With such a cheerful smile he must be the one who possesses it, outstanding ability, huh? The old man in front smiled complacently and replied, of course, I am the god related to wine. The male lead looked at the fairy in front of him and silently said in his mind, oh, this tomato-nosed uncle is so smug. Then he gently asked if his name and last name were Ryan. He quickly replied, oh, that's right, my last name is Ryan. The man marveled, Connor Ryan, how did you know that? Tyson thought helplessly, it's just that anyone who looks at him will see that he resembles Robert. Then he smugly said as if he knew a lot of things, he must have been very miserable during the wine fever period, right? The old man with the red nose was surprised by the male lead's words, no. That's okay. Tyson still continued to speak with that confident look. His eyes looked up and stared at Connor Ryan. He must have had a hard time trying to make a living in a strange land, right? It's very dangerous outside, but he still crossed the ocean to reach another land. The old man's eyes began to look downcast with concern. His eyes flashed with sadness. It was true, but his life at that time was much more miserable. In fact, my father was Irish. As he spoke, his face gradually became heavy. Because of the potato famine, my mother and brothers all died, so my father took me as a survivor to your country with him, but we were both as hungry there as in Ireland. Then his eyes looked up and recalled the memory. We bled to find gold and came to this American land, then worked like crazy to save up to buy each piece of land in this place. We planted grapes. His lips pursed tightly with sadness as he said, my father who died while searching for the gold vein loved wine very much. Even his last wish was to drink a few barrels of wine and die. Tyson looked at the old man in front of him and thought sympathetically, so ghosts also know how to remember their deceased father first. But then he proudly told me that at that time it was really wonderful. The grapevines grew so fast, even though they were cheap products, we could sell them immediately when we made them, and in the surrounding areas, the wine grapes are also number one. The male lead bowed his head to the ground and replied, so that's it. Then he slowly looked up and asked Connor, but this ferry, why didn't he go across the Jordan River? The old man was surprised by his question. What? Tyson worriedly and confusedly said, when people die, they return to the arms of God. Right, you're not very good like this. The old man sadly replied, I often follow my son about that. You should know that that boy cannot accept the grape farm and grape production techniques. So I still stay here to help the wine be brewed well. Tyson explained and advised him that the world had changed a lot. That boy had left a long time ago, so he couldn't do that. The old man is still stubborn. I know, this is not right, but I know I have to leave now, but. His eyebrows furrowed, his eyes filled with despair and said, I have forgotten how to leave. He explained, it's not that I don't leave, it's that I can't leave. The male protagonist asked in surprise, why? Tyson was stunned and couldn't believe it. What? He had forgotten, so he had to wait until he died. He suddenly realized that because it was a different area, he couldn't call Richard River. Suddenly a voice spoke in Tyson's consciousness. Will he use karma points to take this wandering soul to heaven? Hearing the strange voice, he was startled and confused. Huh, what is this? Again, that voice continued to say, or use negative karma points to send him to hell. Tyson bewilderedly responded to the words of the strange voice with a confused, bewildered look. No, what did I say? Where did I take you? I'm just a normal person. The old man Connor looked at him talking alone in confusion. Then he shoddily raised his hand and scratched his head and said, so I'm not a normal person. That voice spoke again in the male protagonist's consciousness. If you take this wandering soul to heaven, you can absorb his power. Tyson was shocked when he heard this, thinking in surprise, what, absorbing power? The next day, in the hotel dining room, a compliment was given. The taste of this champagne is amazing. Another voice replied, don't you think? The three of Tyson, Joe, Yante and Robert were having a meal. Tyson complimented him. It's true that the wine is produced at Champagne, Robert asked in surprise, why? He held up the bottle of wine he was holding in his hand and said, from the moment he uncorked the bottle, it made a very attractive sound. Looking at the bottle of wine in front of him, the male lead carefully evaluated it, and even let out air bubbles. The air bubbles were as transparent as crystal beads. Tyson kept talking, containing a special flavor imbued with the earthy smell of this area. The two people, Robert and Lawyer Joe, were amazed, suddenly looked at him intently but could only say the words, huh? Pouring wine into a glass, holding it in his hand, the male lead is sure of what he is saying. I'm sure he bought it at Champagne, the place that produces the best sparkling wine. Then he raised his hand to prepare to eat the cheese displayed on the table and praised it. Con cheese is also very well fermented, making Robert wonder, even Tempe cheese knows it. Robert was confused and said, it was indeed the boss. Lawyer Joe was puzzled and asked, Representative Jang, why did you suddenly become a winemaker? Tyson keeps talking about wine knowledge. It is made from grapes grown in the first-class Grand Cru with pure lime soil. Looking at this elegance and sophistication, this is an ancient sparkling wine. The wine is not mixed with aged wine but uses Chardonnay. Completely free of artificial scents, from grapes grown in environmentally friendly vineyards. He still spoke to Robert's surprise and amazement, pureeing, pressing, fermenting. Distilling, tempering, and even the mussel shells were perfect. It also maintained the liqueur de tirage at the most reasonable level. The male lead smiled confidently and asked, Robert, is that true? Robert awkwardly replied, At that point, Lawyer Joe was still confused and asked, great. Representative Jang, what exactly do you want to say? The male lead slowly raised the glass of wine to enjoy. When I took a sip, he immediately complimented me. The more I drank, the more delicious it became, from the steps of settling the wine residue, remuage, removing the ice from the neck of the bottle, discouragement, to the step of adjusting the amount of sugar. Everything was done, handcrafted, and the sweetness is to me second sweet. The wine is named after the wine merchant, negotiant, stubborn. The wine's aging time is 5 years. Robert was now red in the face, smiling awkwardly and silently complaining in his heart, "That's prestige QV's class, when was he going to talk about it?" As for Lawyer Joe, he frankly complained, "Representative Jang, please, my ears are bleeding when I hear it." Then Tyson expressed his opinion and desire, "I want to buy this wine production place," causing both Robert and Jo Yun Bae to suddenly exclaim, What? The two of them had wide eyes and opened their mouths in shock, but they had just heard some shocking news. Lawyer Joe looked at him in confusion and asked silently in thought, "Representative Jang, where are you going?" The day came when the three Tyson boarded the plane to return. On the plane, they couldn't stop exclaiming. Tyson secretly thought he didn't expect America to be this big. Lawyer Joe got on the plane and was still curious. "Representative Jang, did you learn about wine yesterday?" Tyson was still staring out the window and thinking, "Every time I pass through American territory I feel new." Lawyer Joe asked Tyson in a teasing tone, "Did you make a contract with the devil? How did you become so smart?" Making the male lead only smile wryly without knowing how to answer. Then he silently reminded himself, "Oh God, I have to change the subject." The male politician politely asked Lawyer Joe, "How do you feel about New York?" He replied naturally, "New York, of course it's an extremely good place." He laughed again and said, "My beloved wife and I have been in New York for more than a month to celebrate my retirement." Tyson silently questioned him and thought, but this uncle still did that to the female flight attendants. Then Lawyer Joe asked about Tyson with a haughty manner, "You probably know that the headquarters of the United Nations is in New York, right?" He calmly answered, "Even elementary school children know that." Suddenly there was an announcement from a plane, announcing that in a few minutes the plane would land at LaGuardia Airport. Lawyer Joe wondered, "So we don't go to Kennedy Airport?" Robert turned to explain that planting wings and landing planes there is very complicated. "So most private planes choose this place." Tyson looked at them and was secretly satisfied. These two people really had to drink a glass of wine to talk to each other. Step off the plane. The three of them went out to the airport to go somewhere else. Robert said, "I booked a suite at the Fulton Hotel." "There is a car and driver waiting in front of you," Robert said, "let's get in the car." Tyson raised his hand to adjust his sleeve, smiled and said, "You two just go." Lawyer Joe asked curiously, "What's wrong? You're not coming with me." He turned around and seriously replied, "I have to go somewhere first." In front of the museum, there is a large inscription, "The Museum of Modern Art," on a white background. Entering the museum, the female employee raised her head and saw that the new visitor was Jang Tyson. He picked up a black card and placed it on the table. The female employee suddenly appeared and immediately thought, could this be a black card from American Express? She stammered and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, the person in charge will be here soon." Jang Tyson refused, there was no need. Then he said, "I want to go sightseeing a little by myself." Seeing the painting Starry Night on the wall, Jang Tyson thought to himself, the famous painting by Van Gogh immediately caught my eye, the painting Starry Night. Enjoying that painting, he felt it brought a magical and mysterious feeling. After falling out with Gauguin, Van Gogh cut off his ear and he painted this painting at the St. Remy Sanatorium. Jang Tyson smiled, feeling happy, thinking, seeing it with my own eyes like this makes me feel so emotional. He continued to think to himself, every time I look at the stars it always makes me wish to see this painting, it's like, I'm hearing Van Gogh's voice. At this time, a woman suddenly appeared, she whispered, "What a beautiful picture." Jang Tyson turned back to look at her. That girl continued, "Whenever we look at the light of the stars, it's like we're all fascinated." The girl turned back to look at the painting with admiration and said that Van Gogh's subjective thoughts about death are expressed through this painting. Jang Tyson looked at her, thinking, she doesn't look but just keeps talking. Suddenly, he realized something and exclaimed, "Ah!" Jang Tyson remembered something, blonde hair. The other girl continued, "Everyone says this painting only shows fantasy, but me." She suddenly stopped and looked down slightly to speak, feeling like it was the struggle of a soul wanting to be saved. She clasped her hands behind her, concluding, so maybe that's why he chose to commit suicide. Jang Tyson suddenly spoke up, "You are wrong." That girl suddenly turned around and exclaimed, "What?" Seeing her turn to look at him, Jang Tyson thought to himself, now is she looking at me? He exclaimed in his heart, "Oh my God, she is truly a beauty." Then Jang Tyson said, Go did not commit suicide, or in other words, suicide was just a kind of inspiration for Go. Jang Tyson explained that he struggled to be saved, but as a creative person, it was just chaos in his mind that everyone had to go through. It could be said that it was madness. The girl didn't believe it and asked again, Go had committed suicide. She said, that's why we can imagine such a close death. It's not an exaggeration to say that Van Gogh's paintings were completed by suicide. Jang Tyson confidently said, I heard that he did not commit suicide. The girl asked in surprise, What did you hear? Who said it? Jang Tyson thought to himself, oh my God, I heard Van Gogh say it himself. He pointed to the painting and explained, Go really liked painting, right now he was just painting. He bandaged his wound, love and weave your own stars. Jang Tyson continued, if it was said that it was suicide, Go would be very sad. The other girl didn't believe what Jang Tyson said and told him that he just said some incomprehensible words. Jang Tyson thought to himself, it's a bit like a lie but it's the truth. Then he turned around, waved goodbye, and said, okay, I'll go first. The girl was surprised and thought, what is that, saying that, and then leaving. Jang Tyson glanced at the frustrated woman behind him, thinking, today I prioritize the painting over the beauty. Then he looked forward and thought to himself, the paintings of the famous Impressionist artists during their lifetime certainly bring a different feeling from the post-Impressionist works. How can I say it? It's probably sexual. Hope has decreased a lot. Jang Tyson looked up at another painting on the wall, under which the words Paul Cézanne were written. He exclaimed that Uncle Cézanne's paintings were also so beautiful. Then he suddenly saw something. Jang Tyson exclaimed, huh? Jang Tyson hesitantly said, why, this? Then he suddenly shouted loudly, what is this? This is fake. His screams alarmed everyone around him. The blonde woman gasped, thinking, what is that? That crazy guy is crazy. Jang Tyson looked at the painting and said, the New York Museum of Modern Art can't afford it either. You're not blind. A woman's voice rang out, what did you just say? She crossed her arms over her chest, her face turned red and said loudly, who are you calling blind? Seeing that woman, Jang Tyson thought to himself, what the hell, is she a stalker? Jang Tyson calmly replied, I just said this is a fake product, what's wrong? The woman said, so you are a strange and disrespectful person. She was a bit annoyed and exclaimed, even if you were a VIP guest with a black card, I can't stand the insults anymore. Jang Tyson was surprised and thought, what, does she know my identity? Everyone around was surprised, not believing that the painting was a fake. Everyone wondered in their hearts, fake, huh? Looking straight at the woman, Jang Tyson asked, who are you? The woman introduced herself, I am Sarah Johansson, the person in charge of Mommy, and this is you rude person. Jang Tyson said, it seems like I have no obligation to introduce you. Sarah Johansson frowned and said, you'll have to do that. Then she continued, right now you said something insulting about a painting by Paul Cézanne. Hearing her say that, Jang Tyson thought to himself, does this blonde girl want to cause trouble? Sarah Johansson raised her hand towards Jang Tyson and said, and you're also harming the honor of the people in the museum. Jang Tyson's face darkened, wondering to himself, should he try it in front of this fiery expert? Jang Tyson said, if I can prove what I said is true, then can you burn this cheap imitation product? Sarah Johansson didn't answer but asked, what if he couldn't prove his nonsense? Jang Tyson replied, since you are the person in charge, I will ask you this, if everyone knew about the museum displaying fake goods, would they leave it alone? He continued, this is also an unacceptable insult to our colleagues. Hearing that, Sarah Johansson was surprised. Everyone standing around was waiting and whispering. Someone asked, what's going on? The man next to him answered, he said that Paul Cézanne painting was a fake. A slightly disbelieving man asked, what, is it true? The man standing behind replied, I don't know. That young Asian man was talking loudly to the person in charge. Sarah Johansson gritted her teeth and said angrily, I won't forgive you. Jang Tyson smiled and said, me too. Suddenly the chief in charge came out and asked, what's going on? Sarah Johansson saw him and said, it's the chief in charge. She told him that this person said Paul Cézanne Chardonnay Noir was a fake. The chief in charge was surprised and said, it's a fake. Jang Tyson stood there with his arms crossed and affirmed, yes, it was a fake. The chief in charge was a bit annoyed but still pretended to smile and said, dear guests, if you insult the painting without grounds, you may be subject to criminal penalties. Hearing what he said, Jang Tyson thought to himself, this guy also plays intimidation games. Then he laughed and said, I saw a fake, so how could I pretend not to know? The chief in charge confidently said, if that was the case, I would report it to the police. Then he pointed to the painting and said, the Chardonnay Noir by artist Paul Cézanne over there is the painting that passed the authenticity test by the inspectors. The head in charge continued, just to make you look like a student. I will be very grateful if you leave here. Sarah Johansson whispered to the manager in charge, this person was a VIP customer. He exclaimed, VIP. Jang Tyson confidently said, let me explain simply why this painting is not real. Then he explained that, as everyone knew, in the last years of his life Cézanne had diabetes. The painting set in Chardonnay Noir is considered excellent, but no one knows Cézanne's situation. He continued, unlike the characteristics of other paintings, the restored Provence paintings have extremely rough and shaky brushwork. The reason why the paintings all have unclear lines is there. The chief in charge said, that's the truth that everyone knows. So what should we do? Jang Tyson answered, the problem is that in 1905, a year before Cézanne's death, his situation was not very good, and another illness also appeared. The chief in charge was surprised and stuttered, saying it was something else. Jang Tyson said proudly that it was hand tremor. The head in charge didn't believe it and exclaimed, why, how is that possible? Jang Tyson said, "Here there is also decisive evidence that can confirm that the painting is a fake." People around were talking loudly. It was so unreasonable. What was the evidence? Jang Tyson continued, "It must be a painting by a talented forger, but that person must have made a huge mistake." Then he concluded, he made the wrong rhythm. The chief in charge doesn't understand, speak, or rhythm. Sarah Johansson also exclaimed, saying, "What are you talking about?" Everyone around him was bewildered, asking each other, what nonsense was he talking about? Why was he suddenly saying something rhythmic in an art museum? Jang Tyson answers questions. Everyone please try to look closely. Just try connecting with paintings in the past, you can recognize very small differences. From paintings painted in 1903, his hands had already begun to tremble in a rhythm of 2-2-3. The chief in charge exclaimed in surprise, "Ah!" Jang Tyson confidently said that the work in 1905 made the hand tremors even more serious. Then he looked towards the painting and said, "But this fake painting has exactly 333 brushstrokes. The artist who faked this painting is extremely strong." Everyone around was loudly exclaiming, "Nonsense, this is so absurd. Unbelievable, there needs to be clearer evidence." Jang Tyson confidently said, "Then I will show everyone the proof." He continued, "I will show everyone that the picture I drew is exactly the same as the fake one, then everyone will believe what I say." During the conference, everyone's discussion rang out. It can be seen that protecting ANA Group's losses is the focus of ANA Group's capital rotation in Korea. That person said, "The focus is on the ANA Group." Another person spoke up, "If only ANA received capital, other subsidiaries would collapse like dominoes." The slightly muted man said, "According to plan, the stock price was falling sharply for many days in a row due to the owner's distrustful image and the American legal entity's suspicion of evasion." He continued, "The merger of subsidiaries that made unreasonable mortgage loans as well as the expansion of capital will have an adverse impact on us. In May and September 2007 we collected by ANA Energy Company and the other company." The dark-skinned man said. At the same time, the debt ratio due to MA increased rapidly with scale. Chairman of the meeting Robert spoke up, "What about the stock situation?" Jang Tyson listened and smiled and thought to himself, "But I was the one who planned it, and Robert was the intermediary. No one knew that all of this was the work of me and Robert." The man wearing glasses said, "The total number of shares issued is 64,900,715 shares with par value of 5,001. The current market is 13,001. The floor price amount is about 843 billion won." He continued, "Within a few months, due to selling for nothing, he lost 3 trillion won." The man wearing glasses turned his head to the side and said, "Per also dropped sharply from 7 to 1.7. As far as I know, the per of other businesses is 14.4. The dark-skinned man said in surprise, "The net debt ratio is 179.48%. If there is further disturbance, the stock price will decrease further." The gray-haired man stated his opinion, "The net profit in the period from 275.5 billion to 538.8 billion was a loss. The investment stance of domestic securities companies changed from consensus selling to selling, strong." Robert asked, "What about the purchasing situation?" The man wearing glasses replied that up to now, he has bought 42% of the shares to ANA Group. He continued, "At the same time, the acquisition of shares of ANA Fire Insurance Company and ANA Life Insurance has ended successfully." Robert continued to ask if he had received the authorization documents yet. The man wearing glasses replied, "I have already received the authorization resolution from the investment agencies for a small amount of money." Hearing him say that, Jang Tyson thought to himself, "The level is different from the profession I learned at the securities company before." Robert asked, "What do you think about ANA Group's response?" Jang Tyson thought to himself, "It's true that Wall Street meetings can't be learned even if you use money." The man wearing glasses answered Robert, "The owner's share is 11%, the revolving capital subsidiaries are about 21%, the domestic pension fund and agencies are 12%, and the remaining shareholders are our sharing ownership." He continued, "The president of ANA Group has close connections with the Korean government." The man wearing glasses looked at Robert and said, "Large investment agencies or pension funds have no choice but to extend a helping hand to ANA." Another man opined that, if business rights exceed foreign capital, the people's protests can be repelled first and not allowed. Banks and company as a subsidiary, so public opinion will not be allowed. How pleasant. After hearing this opinion, Robert said, "Anyway, that's what I predicted. If the US government comes forward, it will be easier to solve." He continued, "So I have invested in political lobbying and built a force of sympathizers in the Korean media. We don't need banks and company anymore." Robert said sternly, "If there was an inspection after the new CEO took office, it would be difficult for the old directors to avoid legal liability. They had made significant profits from accounting and public fraud." "I'm a ghost. This is a typical example of self-indulgent business that American businesses cannot do," he said decisively. "The owner is trash." Robert informed everyone that the FTA between Korea and the US will be announced soon. Because of the situation, investors cannot complain if they want to. In America we have already won 100%. The man sitting next to Jang Tyson sweat dropped and asked, Representative Jang, is that what you said? Jang Tyson smiled stupidly and said, what are you talking about? I'm just an investor. Jang Tyson thought to himself. Now anyone looking at it can see that Robert is the commander. Robert spoke up, so what about the missing Korean shares? Then he nodded slightly and looked towards Jang Tyson. Jang Tyson also smiled and nodded slightly in response. Then he leisurely said, my acquaintance and investment company own more than 1% of the shares. Robert smiled and said, thank you, Representative Daniel. Jang Tyson politely said, it's nothing. Jang Tyson said, when everyone is present like this, I will present the project to investors. Hearing that, Robert asked, oh, what project is that? Jang Tyson said, I want to appoint myself as manager in Korea. After hearing this sentence, everyone in the What does he mean? A man did not accept that and spoke up. A man with 1% of shares is so ambitious. Jang Tyson smiled dangerously, thinking, what should I do, or should I just end it? Jang Tyson explained that Korean public opinion does not support foreign capital. Surely everyone knows that Korean corporations have a special form of business. We will keep everyone's investments safe. Jang Tyson raised his index finger and asked, isn't the purpose of investment to expand profits? The woman wearing glasses spoke up, you're still young, are you going to be the direct manager? Jang Tyson calmly replied, of course not. Jang Tyson asked, have you ever heard of Daewon Group? Robert silently listened to Jang Tyson. The man sitting next to the woman wearing glasses said, if Daewon Group has been dissolved then I know. Then the man hesitantly speculated. Could it be that he wanted to talk to the manager of the bankrupt company? At this time, at the president's place someone shouted out of surprise, what, no shares? Secretary Yu awkwardly said that the circulating shares were all gone. Chairman O exclaimed, this is crazy. Secretary Yu said that there are a lot of rumors about capital acquisitions and mergers with foreign businesses. Stocks that were originally falling have gradually increased in price. President O once again exclaimed in surprise, what? He clicked the mouse. Tried to calm down, asked, yes, how many? Secretary Yu replied, there was 2 billion left. Suddenly looking at the computer screen, Chairman O couldn't believe it, shouting, it had increased to 3 billion. President O stood up, brushed away the paper on the table, and angrily said loudly, damn it. He pursed his lips and said decisively, I can't die, Oh Sung-hyuk, I absolutely can't die. Secretary Yu said that Dong Long Group's subsidiaries hold 2% of Anna's shares. President O was surprised and said, what, President, it's that dog guy. Secretary Yu asked, you have already contacted me. Chairman O gritted his teeth and ordered, okay, you try to create a place. He continued, contact Rin Chong, we will probably need their help. Secretary Yu replied. Yes, I understand. At MoMA Company. Taylor trembled and said, please, avoid copying paintings, so why is it so absurd? The chief in charge said, Taylor, first calm down, didn't you say you would prove it yourself? Taylor clenched his knees and said, what a crazy guy. Taylor said, through Sotheby's, the purchased painting is a fake, this is truly an insult to me. Robert replied, I don't know, just wait, Taylor. Taylor said uncomfortably, look, I know you're very famous these days. Then he suddenly said loudly, but this is an insult to Sotheby's and AAA as well. Today I will let that Asian guy taste my anger. Robert spoke up, Mr. Daniel. Then he affirmed that he is not as arbitrary as what you say. Sarah walked in and said, is everyone screwed, hearing these words? Robert turned towards the direction the words came from. Taylor exclaimed, Sarah. Sarah Johansson said, they said it was done. What Sarah just said made Mr. Robert gasp in surprise, with some fear in his heart. His mouth suddenly made a sound, Sarah saw them with such expressions and didn't understand what she said wrong. How could it be like that? What was going on? The three of them all looked worriedly at Sarah, their faces all filled with shock. Robert's face suddenly darkened, speechless. Yes, the man sitting next to him saw this expression and asked in confusion, Mr. Robert, are you okay? He panicked and looked towards the painting and shouted, it's Chateau Noir. When they heard these words, they panicked, their mouths opened in panic as if they couldn't believe their eyes. Oh my God, no, that's impossible. They all couldn't believe this was true. Everyone looked at the picture in front of them with eyes wide open. Jang Taison's face also darkened. In his heart, Robert silently cried, boss. Suddenly Jang Taison turned back to look at Robert with eyes full of cunning. Seeing this, Robert did not feel cold but trembled, thinking, who exactly is that? He observed the painting for a while, then said in a low voice, "Everyone, please look closely." This Chateau Noir painting was completed by the artist later than the painting of the cliffs next to the cave, so you can clearly see the lines overlapping each other in a 2-2-3 rhythm. After hearing this, the three people were shocked and opened their eyes wide to look at the picture. They had never thought about this. Zhang Taisan turned back to look at the three of them with eyes full of confidence and continued. The dim Chateau Noir preserved at the Picasso Museum of Fine Arts in Paris is a painting that was completed later. He picked up the paintbrush and continued. At that time he first developed hand tremors, so in order to correct the trembling of his fingers, he added the color nuances of the painting by moving slightly, gently between strokes. But, this painting displayed in this museum clearly uses the 3-3-3 rhythm coloring method. Zhang Taisan showed his professionalism by giving an explanation, standing in front of the eyes of the 5 remaining people. But still full of confidence. To the surprise of everyone present, he continued, the way of drawing was nothing special, it is the trace of the soul that the artist created by combining space with time, as well as the artist's body and spirit. The more he spoke, the more everyone present gasped in surprise, as if everyone couldn't believe their eyes. That's why. He continued, the extremely healthy Chateau Noir painting hangs on the 5th floor. It's a fake product, he confidently affirmed these things in front of everyone. Having said that, his eyes suddenly flashed, containing a deep understanding that Paul Taisan's soul was not in that painting. I can't accept this as the truth, Robert said in panic. I can't accept it. Anyone who looks at it will think that this painting on display at MoMA is by Paul Taisan. The rest of the people here could not accept this myth, they protested. It was a painting that combined an abstract atmosphere, in addition to the poetic vibration and the color mixture, perfect performance. Sarah also frowned and objected. What is the rhythm of 2-2-3? Please say something easier to understand. Hearing these words, Zhang Taisan only had one thought, tisk tisk, these stupid people. Faced with everyone's disbelief, he immediately said, look here. It seemed that the next action made everyone once again unable to believe their eyes. Robert was also startled and exclaimed. The rest were no less. Oh my god, what was that? Suddenly a figure appeared behind Zhang Taisan, he seemed to be a foreigner. Zhang Taisan said in a low voice, I don't even have the smell of my feces anymore. Seeing the figure behind Zhang Taisan, everyone gasped in surprise. They seemed to have encountered something shocking, then they exclaimed, is it Paul Cézanne? Switch scene to New York, high above a restaurant overlooking the entire flashy, luxurious city of New York. Any travel helps relieve the mood. The meeting between me and Clara also happened like that, Zhang Taisan said. A glass of wine was poured, a seductive red color, a masculine voice rang out, and there was a lot of Chateauneuf-style wine. A girl wearing black stockings and leopard print high heels, with a seductive posture, asked, do you know Chateauneuf? A luxurious meal with expensive dishes and expensive bottles of wine. It seemed like Zhang Taisan was remembering something, but at that time I was still young. Clara seemed to have hidden a lot of things from me. Clara spoke up and introduced the type of wine they were using, which was produced in 2000. The taste is very different, right? In his mind, he seemed to be recounting a memory. I used to like Clara, but it wasn't a deep love. The two of them raised their glasses together. Clara said, if you drink it just once you can know its taste. Zhang Taisan raised his glass, smiled and said, it can be said that the strong vitality permeates this wine. Clara, sitting next to her, let out a loud cry. She asked back, is that true? A pair of red lips looks so seductive. But the beautiful woman is sitting in front of me. Her body exudes the scent of a mature woman. And is a beautiful and friendly person, Clara said with a friendly smile. It seems like you really like wine. The two of them sat facing each other. With a view of the entire beautiful New York City, she joked, commenting on Daniel's wine was like poetry, so it sounded good. When I heard that, I just laughed. He felt very happy and comfortable when talking to her. She returned to her serious look and said, thanks to Daniel. I have achieved my wish, Zhang Taisan asked again, confused, why? Clara said, this place is considered an expensive place in New York, and it is difficult to book in advance, so thanks to you. I have this honor. Hearing that, Zhang Taisan laughed and replied, it's nothing. New York City at night is even more splendid, a beauty that few places have. Clara asked, how could you do that today? Zhang Taisan didn't understand what she was asking. What to do? She was a bit shy when asking this question, a little timidly asked. Was that drawing really drawn by Daniel? Zhang Taisan saw that it was normal for her not to believe. He smiled happily and asked, if you've seen it and still don't believe it, how can I prove it? After hearing this, Clara said without a doubt that it seemed that many inspectors had failed to detect that difference. Zhang Taisan turned his suspicious eyes towards her and said. She probably wanted to ask how I knew, for someone living in Korea, where there are no paintings by Paul Cézanne. It seemed like she was being told the truth, so she just silently laughed it off. Jung Tae-san spoke up to clarify this matter. As I said, that picture has no soul. Although the fake artist's technique and coloring were perfect, he had no love for the painting in that painting. When she heard this, she was a bit surprised. Maybe it was something she didn't think about. What, feelings? He smirked and continued. In short, suddenly he looked straight into her eyes and called her by her full name, Ms. Sarajianko. He called her like that, making her jump and exclaim, "What?" She seemed to discover something was wrong. Not knowing where she had gone wrong, she stood still for 5 seconds, then she smiled wryly and said, "Just call me Sarah." Jung Tae-san suddenly looked down. His eyes contained something very difficult to tell. If he did not have a sensitive soul to be able to feel everything, without emotion, it's just a mask of lies in a picture filled with only ambition. Hearing that, Sarah was interested and asked in return, "Did Daniel put feelings into his drawings?" He used to look full of confidence to speak straight towards her. The answer was in my eyes. She felt shy when she saw that. Her face started to heat up. Ah. He spoke silently, regretfully. It seemed like she misunderstood what he meant. What, the food? Hearing that, he thought to himself. Sarah, do you really not understand that's why you asked like that? He looked outside the door. The moonlight was already high, now he said, it seems like time passes so quickly today. Hearing that, she understood the meaning. Where are you going? He thought to himself. Yes, I'm going to school. He smiled friendly and said, after finishing tomorrow's schedule. I have to return to Korea. His mouth said that, but in his heart he was thinking about something else. With a mocking tone, he turned back to see them waiting in line. Hearing that, Sarah felt a bit regretful. Sorry, really sorry, I wanted to talk about paintings with Daniel more. Suddenly she spoke in a hesitant tone, as if she had something to say, but hey, Daniel. He didn't think much and asked again, why? She shyly said, today. Hearing this, he suddenly jumped, his hands twitching in panic. Today, what is that? She stopped talking halfway. Her wine-red lips pursed, his heart jumped. Could it be? His eyes opened wide and worriedly looked towards her, afraid she would say something shocking. Then she shyly, her face turned pink, timidly said, do you want to drink another glass of wine? Suddenly the tip of the wine bottle turned towards her, making her startled and surprised, not understanding what was going on. His face looked extremely unsightly. He tried to keep his face calm and said, come on, quickly get another drink. His face in her eyes right now looks like a new handsome guy. She looked at him drooling, her face turning increasingly pink, thinking, this man is strangely cool. The moon rose higher and higher, showing that it was very late. Inside the tall, luxurious-looking gate, there was a voice coming from inside. The new target's name was Tae-san. According to Korean age, it is 20 years old. In a large villa, someone spoke up and reported that he was currently a first-year law student at Korean University, a very famous school. As far as I know, in just 2 years his assets have reached tens of billions of dollars thanks to new investment secrets. A man holding a half-burned cigarette, smoke billowing out, spoke up, earning tens of billions of dollars thanks to a new investment secret. A white-haired old man stood before his boss and respectfully spoke up. According to the announcement, Mr. Councilman, the so-called councilman spoke quietly, so he's already met robbery. The old man smiled gently and replied. According to information, he was still conducting MA transactions. The congressman voiced his doubts. MA. The old man continued, apparently he joined as an investor and would manage a Korean corporation. As hard as it seems to believe, the congressman asked again, a corporation? The senator continued, surely he has an eye on financial woes. The silver-haired old man cautiously replied that to deal with that, he also ended the short sale with a foreigner. Next, he kept a friendly expression on his face and said that he would soon consider the handover plan. A devilish smile appeared, looking full of venom. He smirked. Oh, so he had an eye on the financial crisis. The old man respectfully replied, according to the information I received. That was the case. He exclaimed in admiration, full of sarcasm, including a bit of interest. This young man is so talented. The castle that appeared in the night became even bigger and more magnificent, showing the wealth of the people. Politics. Next to the bed were remnants of last night's violence. It can be said that human ambition is like going on a long road and then exploding like crazy. Sarah is such a hot woman. The girl's seductive body appears through the glass, blurry, making people curious. When dawn came, that beautiful girl left a long kiss and then silently left. After the man woke up, he went to the bathroom to wash again. He thought to himself, he also left his phone number. After saying that, he smirked and said with interest, is this America's style? Jang Tae-san, after spending a night with the beauty, is now covered in kiss marks all over his body. He stands in front of the mirror and smiles stupidly, thinking. So the fox also has 9 tails, right? High-rise buildings keep growing next to each other. The attack and the power to elect the president and director of Anna Group have been transferred to the investment legal entity lore. It seems like the script that Robert and I arranged has been completed. Robert sat across from Jiang Tae-san and smiled happily and said, "Don't you have any other instructions? It seems like I have now become the president of a multi-level company." Jiang Tae-san smiled in response. How many shares of Donglong Group did he buy? If anyone paid attention, they would see that he had a few bandages on his neck, which he was probably trying to cover up. Robert is a professional worker, he carefully reported back. The sale of shares was not as much as I thought. The main project according to domestic demand is also very solid. The capital rotation structure of Donglong Securities in Donglong stable. Even if you buy the maximum shares of the core Donglong company, you cannot exceed 40%. The owner's ownership is very large, he thought to himself. I also predicted this. According to that line of thinking, in a few years the East Dragon will collapse into rubble. But not now, he quietly asked if there was any solution. Robert grimaced a bit. He offered a solution. We should try contacting Donglong Confectionery Company. The party holds 10% of Donglong shares, although it also uses the name Donglong. The legal entity is a different person. He looked out the window and silently assessed. Donglong Company. Robert continued to explain, it is true that Donglong Company also holds 10% of the shares of Donglong Confectionery Company, but they also don't trust each other like other family groups. His eyes turned dangerous and filled with unpredictability as he continued. They continued to be shaken by short selling. I also heard that the company's reserves are low due to its intention to enter the Russian market. Hearing that, Zhang Taishan also nodded in approval, as expected of someone he trusted. What a good solution, let's shake them up. And I'll try contacting them and see. After speaking, he paused for a moment. Then said, Robert heard the boss call and replied in confusion, what's wrong, boss? Zhang Taishan smiled friendly and told Robert the good news. His salary this year is $100 million. Hearing these words, Robert was startled. He couldn't believe his ears. What, $100 million? Having received a salary increase, he was happy. With tears in his eyes, he looked at Zhang Taishan with touching eyes, speechless. Boss. The scene changes to a sky-high building, and a slightly worried voice comes out. Hey, are you okay? On the highest rooftop of a building, the back of a beautiful girl appeared. It seemed like she was talking to someone on the phone. She replied, it's okay. At the beginning of the second, the other person heard that and breathed a sigh of relief. That's lucky. The girl was silent for a while. Then she spoke up and continued, he is just an investor, he can go down to the green level. It seems like this is not a small thing. If you say you can do it, you can do it. The other end of the line is a bit hesitant. Miss, I have to confirm this further. Hearing that, the girl sounded a bit unhappy and said, what are you saying? Cormier, you don't believe me. The other party is embarrassed. No, it's not like that. The girl's voice was cold when she heard that, so let's just deal with it like that. The other end of the second quickly replied, I understand. She seemed to remember something and continued, oh, please arrange some people to follow you a little further away, it's too obvious. Hearing that reminder, he immediately replied, yes, I understand. Before the conversation ended, she left a sentence, I will call my father myself. You have worked hard. The other party heard that and didn't ask much. Just replied, yes, please rest. After listening, she immediately hung up the phone. She looked at the phone for a while not knowing what she was thinking. Then she stood up. Walked away from that place. She was still in a state of deep thought, just walking straight forward. Her lips pursed tightly, looking up at the sky thinking, the closer he comes to her, the more dangerous she will be. She walked closer to the railing, her eyes full of regret. Sadness appeared on her face, her eyes looked into the distance, thinking, goodbye, Daniel. In an area where rows of companies are rising, every building is sky high. In a certain company, while working, a man brought a gift box in front of her, put it down and gently said, Captain Ju, take it. When she saw that, she couldn't help but be surprised. It turned out that Jiang Tae-san had just returned from a business trip. He brought a gift to Captain Ju and happily said, it was a gift. Captain Ju saw the person giving him a gift and stood up, hey, representative. She was quite surprised. Her face turned pink, her eyes were a bit expectant, but also a bit worried and asked, what's wrong? Jiang Tae-san didn't have any intentions, he smiled and replied friendly. It was a favor, please help me prepare a delicious cup of coffee. Being asked by such a handsome person, why hesitate to help, she quickly replied. Yes, I will go prepare a delicious cup of coffee. She stood looking at Jiang Tae-san's back and couldn't help but gasp, thinking, is that so, something? It seems like the atmosphere has changed a bit. The more she thought about it, the more flushed her face became, and the girl's soul became happier. She happily hugged her face and thought, it seemed like he became more attractive. Jiang Tae-san sat in front of the computer screen, not knowing what he was thinking. His hands kept tapping. The computer screen was filled with numbers. Looking at these numbers, I thought to myself, you guys are so busy today, wow, that's crazy, amen. All the screens in front of him are filled with rows of numbers, even you are crazy. I feel so heartbroken, amen amen. Tae-san moved the mouse continuously, muttering, it's true that the more money you use, the more addicted you become, haha. Looking at the screen in front of him, endless thoughts kept running through his mind. Even the art market was dealt a heavy blow by subprime debt. It seemed like it would disappear soon, but there was no reason for these items. These expensive luxury items sell well. His face seemed satisfied, staring at the numbers in front of him with some calculation. Right now, there are few things to buy about fine art items. This world is big and there are many things that are both cheap and good. He is truly a genius investor, as expected of him being only 20 years old to be able to hold this position. He had some thoughts. 2008 was the time to sell off the business again after 10 years. In 2009, the world's first electronic currency created by Satoshi Nakamoto was also launched. Satoshi Nakamoto was both a cryptographer and a computer scientist, known as the creator of Bitcoin. The more he thought about it, the more excited he became, his eyes filled with excitement every time passed. I cleaned up like I was buying snacks. The era of buying a pizza for 5,000 bitcoins is coming. He raised his eyes to the sky, thinking further about his future, and at that time he would directly begin to develop. While he was deep in thought, his phone rang and rang. He put on his headphones, looked at the number and knew who was calling. He said, "Yes, it's me, Lawyer Joe. Lawyer Joe is calling to report to you on the situation of Anna Company, Rep. Jang, I have just submitted a request for a temporary general shareholders meeting to change the CEO at Anna's headquarters." After listening, Jang Tae-san was a bit surprised. A light flashed his mind. He didn't think it would happen so quickly. Quickly recovering his initial calmness, he curled his lips and said, "You did a good job." After speaking, his eyes became much more dangerous. Images of Anna's owners appeared in his mind. He decided to start declaring war. From now on it will be war. Then he immediately turned serious and said, "You've worked hard. Lawyer Joe, well, I still have one more thing I want to ask you for help with. If you hear Chairman Jang has something to ask you, don't hesitate to refuse, just ask, what's going on, just say it." He said, "I want to buy a school to use as a legal fund." When Lawyer Joe heard about the school purchase, he was a bit surprised and immediately asked again. "School, what, middle school or high school?" On the other side, Lawyer Joe kept asking, "Was it for Jang Ju-shir or was it for your father?" Hearing this, he could only smile. Not seeing an answer, Lawyer Joe continued to guess, could it be the university? Jang Tae-san said softly, Yongyong University has been sold. A thought appeared in his mind. After all, it is a second life. It's also possible to receive benefits even after death. Right, he continued, go to the director and make an agreement, saying I will throw them 200 billion. At the end of the second, the other party could only keep silent and follow. His eyes looked up at the distant sky, thinking in his heart that the university would definitely use his mother's name. Scene changed to So Company. Everyone here is bustling with traffic. Everyone is busy with their work. In the director's office, someone shouted in panic. "Director, what should we do now?" It turns out this is Sam Woo Law Firm. The man's face turned pale and worriedly said, "Those dogs are really crazy, they want to bring our group into the water." A man wearing a brown suit spoke in a deep voice. Lately there have been rumors that the Samwoos are getting more and more strange. But it seemed that this man was a bit worried. On the contrary, he calmly said, "Don't worry, that's what Samwoo was supposed to be like." The car sped along the street. The car owner's eyes looked up at the skyscraper. The car's engine whirring. On both sides were towering company buildings. Traffic was bustling on the campus, and the supercar kept rushing forward. Suddenly, the car made a quick turn, leaving a squealing sound on the road due to the wheel spinning quickly. It seems like the car owner is also a professional driver. Then it stopped. The car scraped against the road and made a screeching sound. It seemed like it had reached its destination. A foot wearing shiny black leather shoes stepped down. He stood next to the car and looked up at the public building in front of him, not knowing what he was thinking. Suddenly a security guard came out, looked at the guy parking in front of him and reminded him, "Hey there, you're not allowed to park here." He turned around and smiled friendly and asked the security guard, "Is there anything here?" When I heard the guard, I was a little confused. "What's wrong? What's wrong with you? Why are you looking for your aunt here?" He smiled brighter, radiating a face full of goodwill and asked again, "Is Aunt Jumi Ran here?" When the security guard heard this woman's name, he felt a little uneasy. "What?" He gasped in surprise, as if he had been hit in the head with a shock. Speechless. "You mean, boss, chairman," this time at the corporation's headquarters. Someone asked, "Oh director, how much capital is left?" The respondent replied that currently the amount of usable capital is about 90 billion. Inside the meeting room, the woman sitting in the chair continued to speak. "It seemed there wasn't much left than I thought." Another person said, "We have used part of the loan to invest in Russia to pay off the debt. The bank draft says that even if part of the loan is paid, the request will still be sent." The woman tapped her hand on the table in response. I also heard that. Then the woman hesitated again. But this opportunity is truly a pity. The person who spoke was Jumiran, Jung Tyson's aunt, Ju Sol Ran's half-sister. And the director of Dong Long Confectionery. Suddenly, the phone next to her rang. She pressed the listen button with an annoyed tone, not knowing we were in a meeting. The person on the other end of the line hesitated. Director, the thing is, a customer came to see the director. She was surprised. Who was the guest? The person on the other line answered. This person claimed to be the director's nephew. Jumiran was confused. Nephew, said it was my nephew, that's right. Then suddenly she got angry again. What nonsense was she talking about? Those guys didn't have any contact and didn't want to chase them away. The announcer stammered. Ju Sol Ran, she's crazy, what? Then the other side's voice rang out again, but it wasn't telling her, hey there, don't go in. Jumiran is confused right now. Ju Sol Ran. Suddenly the meeting room door opened. The person coming was Jung Tyson. He happily called out, Auntie. This nephew missed his aunt so much that he came to visit her. She started sweating, going crazy. Before she could finish her sentence, Tyson rushed to hug her, happily. I miss you like crazy, right? So are you. Suddenly being hugged, Jumiran was confused and couldn't react in time. What was going on? He continued to interrupt her. I was also very surprised to hear that I also had an aunt. She panicked and thought, is this boy Sol Ran's son? I ignored the looks of the people present in the meeting room right now, almost turning it into a deserted place. This is a gift for you, Aunt. It's just a small gift. But please accept it. He absolutely did not give Jumiran any chance to react. I came too quickly so I couldn't prepare properly. This is a 2008 limited edition watch with carved gems from Cartier. It's only 100 million. He thought to himself, after all. This aunt is a woman. At this point, she hesitantly turned to the others. Maybe the match should be moved to next time. Everyone in the meeting room stood up. We understand. Waiting for everyone to leave, Jumiran spoke up. Okay, you said you're Sol Ran's son. Your name is? He curled his lips and replied, it's Jang Tyson. She asked again, what about Sol Ran? He still calmly asked and replied, my mother is at home. She continued asking. This time there seemed to be a problem, but she was a bit hesitant. Your house, where do you live? He looked at her silently for a moment, then proudly introduced, my family lives in Jiangsu City. Hearing that, Ran was a bit thoughtful, so I live in the countryside. Then she said something incomprehensible. Good, it's safe to live far away. Then she asked again, okay. What are you doing? You look young, he interrupted. Yes, I'm a student. So, where? He smirked and replied, I'm in my first year of law school at Korea University. Hearing the name of the school, she was a bit startled. So that's what it was. Looks like you also study hard. Then suddenly he asked again, but, Auntie, just now you said it's safe to live in a faraway place. What do you mean? She laughed. It turns out you didn't know, that's why you asked. Tyson smiled harmlessly and nodded. Then he heard the yin and yang monster speak. What is that? Probably afraid of my brother. Tyson was confused and scared. Jumiran said in a low voice, that's right, in this world the person who was most afraid of is his brother, so you should be careful too. Suddenly Tyson pushed a business card in front of her. He calmly explained that I was also running a small investment company. Hearing that, I was surprised. What, just now you said you were a student, is this yours? He smiled brightly. It's really your company, Ran also exclaimed. Wow, you're so successful. Then suddenly he asked a question with no beginning or end. Only my aunt did it. This question made Ran sweat. Then she spoke up uncomfortably. Stop saying those incomprehensible words. Running a company is not easy. Very tired. Tyson replied to her. I'm sure he will help. Suddenly she called out in a low voice, Nephew, Tyson is confused. What's wrong? Don't ask me what I'm doing. I know, and you also know that you are not a generous person when you bring here a watch worth 100 million. What is your real purpose in coming to see me? Then suddenly she lowered her voice and seemed serious. If she didn't feel sorry for your mother. It would be a lie. When my mother passed away and the new mother came, I was only 10 years old. Is that appearance good for a child like me? Even so, I don't hate them that much. I don't hate that slow and smiling sister, but if I look like I care about your mother, I'll get beaten by my brother. I also just want to live. Her words made my blood run cold. He thought to himself, what kind of crazy person is this? Then she continued crying, my brother. He is truly a very scary person. These words made him confused, but I still had doubts. It's not enough that he had to hire an assassin to kill someone I didn't even know was me. If I die, he won't receive anything, so why? I can't inherit either. My order of inheritance is also very far away. At this moment, Tyson seemed to be falling into his own confused thoughts. His eyes looking at the woman appeared dull and unbelievable. In order are the parents. Then the children. Suddenly he realized something about, wait for it, the weakness of the legal inheritance system. If he kills me and then kills my father, all my assets will go to my mother. And he would take care of all his sisters, and eventually kill his mother. That's right, that's definitely the scenario. Thinking like that made him grit his teeth in anger. The old bastard. Suddenly Mirant spoke up to pull him out of his thoughts. But why did you come to me? It doesn't seem to be for money. He smirked. In the near future I intend to hand over a company. She was shocked. What, boy, why isn't it your mother or father? He did not explain but continued, at that time, the company will be divided into 2 companies. She was startled. What, split up? What, do it like big companies, you? He thought to himself. It's not a big company but a corporation, and, I called her, and, you're confused, huh? He did not answer immediately but looked at her with a deep smile. His look made her panic, stammering, what? What's wrong? Are you trying to ask me for help? I have a suggestion, whether you want to do a big deal with you or not. The scene changes to another building. Now it's nighttime. A voice rings out, look at this guy, how can a brat like him have so much money? He's the president's nephew. Another person asked, the hired killer also failed, what is this guy? That person read documents about him and continued, it seems like he also has outstanding talent in art and music. After enrolling at Korea University. Then suddenly he saw something that shocked the man. It turned out that on the information that he was dating Yuri, the man couldn't believe his eyes. At this time in a kendo practice room, Tyson swung his sword and slashed an apple while thinking. I warned my aunt. I told you to be careful about your business plan. Each apple was continuously cut in half under his blade. After a while of fierce slashing, he used the tip of his sword to hold half of the apple firmly and did not continue. After stopping, Tyson began to breathe evenly to regulate the air, which, he thought, was still not enough. Breathing, posture and swordsmanship are still not perfect. With just director Han Jinwong, there is a limit to blocking him. Looks like that uncle used some kind of power that I didn't know about, while thinking. He remembered the past of his previous life when he was surrounded and beaten by those people. Then suddenly he came out of the cycle of reminiscing, curled his lips and smiled. But there was no way I was stuck, immortal god like the great Jade Emperor. I have an illegal tutoring assistant. Then he suddenly smiled happily and muttered. Tianlong Then Quan, you picked up the signal I left, that's why you came, right? He smiled and thought, surely the first dream was scary, then suddenly he shivered. A message appeared in his mind, because he was not level enough, he could not summon a mid-level god or higher. This made him startled and scream, what, not enough levels? He thought back in panic, what, so all the gods he had ever met were not even intermediate level but just low level? I thought just earning points would be enough, it's not a game but there are level limits. At this moment, his phone suddenly rang. I picked up the phone, director, is there something wrong? The person on the other end of the line immediately responded, apologizing for disturbing the president at such a late hour. The thing is, president. Hearing the director's hesitation, he laughed it off and kept talking. The person on the other end hesitated, I would like to ask permission, could the chairman take a moment now? The director's reserved tone made him confused, wrong, now. He asked worriedly, what was going on, was he threatened by something? The person on the line immediately replied, no, it's not like that. This person wants to meet the president. The director's address surprised him, this one. After hearing what the other party said, he replied, I understand. The scene changes to a villa on a certain hill, an unhappy voice rings out, failure. How many people can lose to a low-ranking person? In the room, the person sitting at the desk is incomprehensible and low-class, a welder, as soon as he stood opposite. He replied, yes, Mr. Captain. The assassins were all under police surveillance so I couldn't approach them. One guy committed suicide, the other 2 guys are in a vegetative state. The other boy was unhappy when he heard the report. He asked in a cold voice. Who was the subject? The other officer hesitated, about that, the tenant is also in a vegetative state so I still don't have the information. The other person gave the order, then the matchmaker will take stock of the situation, also, stop this, the other man received the order and obeyed. Then the other boy reminded him that this was the group's honor. Scene changed to a certain apartment complex at night. The street is always extremely deserted, the whole road is asleep. There is only one car on the road. The car stopped, he got out and introduced himself. I'm Jang Tyson. The bodyguard who was assigned to greet you raised his hand and is waiting for you inside. He followed 2 bodyguards down the hallway to meet the boss and the man's words. Coming to a room, he pushed the door open and saw a figure. There was a big man sitting fishing. He said, ho ho, we finally met you. He didn't answer but looked around the room and exclaimed. This place is quiet so it's great. The middle-aged man laughed, that's right. The young man knows everything. Whenever I'm stressed, going fishing is the best place. Then he turned to make a cup of coffee and asked him, "Do you drink coffee?" Tyson smiled, "Yes, please give me a drink." Suddenly he asked him a question. Why does the young man sound like that? Haven't he joined the army yet? Tyson was a bit startled and thought, it seems like he knows all the information about me. I've already enlisted in the army. But, it's just that no one knows. He looked at his expression and laughed. It's not like I heard that from my children. Even though I'm a decrepit old man now, I used to have intelligence abilities that no one in the intelligence department could match. Now it's almost progressing in the right direction. He looked at the old man with a gentle face and thought, it looked funny, at that time. The person who used to play with the Korean economy, the president, Do Woon-young. The old man picked up the chopsticks and stirred the pot of noodles and asked him, "Are you 20 years old this year?" He smiled politely, "Yes sir, have you caught any fish yet?" The old man laughed, "Huh, I didn't release bait anymore so no fish took the bait, it smells very fishy so I don't eat freshwater fish." Then he gave him a bottle of wine. "Come on, you take one." Tyson scratched his head and smiled, "Ah, yes." He poured wine into a glass and calmly said, "Okay, I heard you were making arrangements for my children." He also calmly replied to him, "It was just an exaggeration, I just found it satisfactory so I hired them." The old man laughed again, "Huh, good, I don't know about the others, but they are loved wherever they go." "But you also have a lot of money." His question made Tyson surprised. "Oh, why?" He still smiled. Why was he surprised? There were so many rumors. "Already opened accounts for your mother and you." Tyson was embarrassed right now, not knowing what to say. Suddenly the old man got serious. "There's this guy, don't trust the people in the government, everywhere is full of worms and spies." The director who was elected this time only had money on his mind. After learning that the previous president was a devil greedy for money, he was chased away. "But I didn't expect to become president. This life is truly ironic," the old man exclaimed. At this moment, Tyson seemed to be thinking about something. He looked quite confused. Your expression caught his attention, ha. Then he laughed. Wait, the young man also knows how to read faces. Tyson is shocked, ha. His understanding of himself made him sweat. Wow, the president of a big company isn't something everyone can do. I've never been caught before, but today I was caught. At this time, the old man continued. You should only believe in moderate numbers or the four pillars. Even if you can see the past by reading physiognomy, you cannot know the future. That's human. If times change, even saints will be corrupted, so we have to change the future. You should consider looking at the or the four pillars. Don't trust people too much. But don't take it too lightly. The late president's profound knowledge left Tyson stunned. The old man still calmly said, just keep trying every second and every minute. That is enough. Even if you were betrayed and lost everything like me, don't complain. That's destiny. He asked in surprise. Sir, betrayed? He calmly recounted, yes, and was stabbed again by the person I trusted the most. The old man started to get serious. Director Zhang, they were more than you imagined. They are very stubborn and cruel people. Remember, they always aim for your neck. Hearing him say that, Tyson was both angry and surprised. Who are they, after all? Who would dare do that to you? The old man recalled the scene when he was young with a group of people who were all elites. Then he slowly replied, it was the same sect. This name makes Tyson extremely scared. What, one sect association? It's Niatong Hui, Director Zhang said with a cold face. Tyson gasped, his head made unpleasant buzzing sounds. The snake ancestors had begun to recognize you. Merit points were returned to humanity Duwonjong as a price for obtaining information. Director Zhang squinted at him with a profound meaning. He continued, they are dirtier than parasites. His wide, dry mouth and wrinkles left by old age radiated coldness. Director Zhang frowned and began to sit up straight to maintain the necessary serious demeanor. Daewon was hunted by them. Search vigorously. One Tong Hui. Tyson opened his eyes wide in surprise. This was the first time he heard the name of this organization. Dozens of questions flooded his brain. Tyson wondered if One Tong Hui was a gangster organization. What exactly is the One Sect Society? Are you saying someone is targeting me? He asked. In order to not die at the hands of foreigners with black hair and people who are staring at my neck, there is no other way but to throw Daewon out as a sacrifice, Director Zhang said with a calm expression. Tyson's face turned pale, his eyes widened when he heard Director Zhang mention the foreign woman with black hair. Is it related to Anna Group? Tyson frowned, looking uncomfortable. I don't know the details either, I only learned about their existence only after they went bankrupt. Director Zhang said regretfully. Director Zhang turned around and smiled widely at Tyson. Do you also see that I am a thief? Tyson smiled politely and replied, you used it freely. throwing money into politics and also cheating on accounting. Tyson continued to speak while Director Zhang slowly narrowed his eyes in embarrassment. If I say more, there are dozens of things, he laughed cheerfully and held out his hand. That's right, I did that, Director Zhang pushed his glasses, his face covered in sweat. But at that time everyone was like that, other businesses also committed accounting fraud. It's the same now, it's even more serious than then, he explained. Yes, I am indeed a thief, he admitted with a smile. I am not satisfied with a small and narrow nation, so I intend to steal everywhere. Tyson looked at him, seemingly shocked by his frank confession. But, damn, the company went bankrupt. Although it seems like an excuse. I don't intend to steal alone, he continued. I just want to give employees more bonuses. And create better jobs for people, he smiled bitterly, mocking the irony of his life's fate. I simply want to be the leader, not only in the small Republic of Korea, but on the large world stage. Tyson quietly and seriously listened to Director Zhang. I also know, it's true that President Du Woon-jong gave the union a treat. Tyson thought to himself. At the IMF, when all the big businesses participated in restructuring and exceeded their targets, employees said they had no place to go, so we couldn't fire them even by 20%. The government was not satisfied with that result, so the company went bankrupt. He sighed with regret. Do you know the person named Jo Hun-jae? Director Young asked. The former director GM Gang, Tyson answered. Ha, that's right, that Jo Hun-jae was my employee at one time. I originally fired him when he was negligent in handling his work. That guy took revenge and stabbed me in the back. Tyson opened his mouth wide and asked in surprise, really? He used to be a flatterer and flattered me, but he shook hands with Yang Bong-joon, who used to be the Minister of Economics. Tyson asked skeptically, the two of them are members of the Tong Nyet Tong Association, right? Director Young calmly said, I don't know, but it's very suspicious. Tyson asked in confusion, what do you say? The one-sex society is not a simple organization. It has gone through 100 years of history. What, 100 years? Tyson asked in disbelief. Tyson was surprised and turned to Stemmer and asked Director Young, so since the Joseon period? Not yet, not to that extent, Director Young replied. Ban Young-jo, Sun Kook-young, Chun Il-kwon, remember these names, he advised? It's the creditor, cough cough. Director Young coughed and choked at his answer. He said with a solemn face and a serious tone, they are bastards who have sold their country many times. The name Ban Young-jo. Could it be that Ban Young-jo? National Daily, Tyson asked in shock. Director Young laughed and said, you're not stupid. Right, Tyson asked again, yes, stupid. Ban Young-jo is the older brother of the former president of the National Daily newspaper. Director Young recounted that the deep, husky voice typical of the elderly made him feel more nostalgic. That's it, Tyson nodded, listening attentively to the story he was telling. The name Sun Kook-young later became a lawyer. And he rose to the position of Chief Justice of the Supreme Court and established a faction of talented lawyers. Sun Kook-young, Tyson wondered. Director Young sighed. As the founder and leader of RNC Law Office, Tyson couldn't believe what he just heard. He shouted, RNC. And the name Chun Il-kwon, during the dictatorship era, when he was alive. He was both the Prime Minister and a member of the National Assembly, the President of the Korea-Japan Conference, the first President of the Liberal Democracy Association, and he is also the worst of the bad. His son is now also a member of Parliament. Tyson clenched his fists and jumped up. Ah, damn, what a terrible bastard. Director Young sighed, they hid very skillfully. It took me a while to find them. They are even better at hiding than birds and mice. Nyet Tonghoi is an organization founded by people who received money from a Japanese secret organization, secretly used political funds and intended to sell out the Republic of Korea, attracting major media and individuals acting as supporters to destroy the political world. You should find out about that. If that's the case, then you'll live long. Director Young suggested while laughing. Tyson opened his eyes wide and looked at him. He smiled and continued, there is this quote in Shakespeare's play Macbeth that I like. Weakness can summon evil at any time, only by being strong can we survive. Wow, Dad, what's going on? Aren't you busy today? Haha, you're not busy. We should also take the time to date our daughter, Yuri's father said. Ah, if you have time like that, why don't you make an appointment with Mom? She's probably going through menopause, so she's always nagging. Dad, please take care of Mom a little, Yuri smiled shyly. So we're dealing with envelopes that your mother likes, wow. You like envelopes too, she covered her mouth and laughed. Yuri's father smiled and generously said, okay, after eating, give me a thick envelope, thank you, Dad, she said happily smiling. Her father smiled and said, Yuri, her face was sweating, shyly asking, yes, remember the time when you were in my arms begging me to buy you some real snacks? Ah, you're not a snack, she dismissed. Yuri's father slowly wiped his mouth as if waiting for her to confess something. He smiled politely and asked, "Don't you have anything to tell me?" For example, about dating. Yuri was nervous and sweaty. "What kind of date?" she denied. "There is no such thing, never." Her father smiled politely and asked, "Is that right?" "Absolutely not." "Yes, I still don't have one." Yuri is tense. She is worried that her relationship with her lover will be discovered. "Then you quit school and go study abroad in France for a few years. It's good to go to school and graduate from university there. Why do you study abroad?" "Why so suddenly?" Yuri asked in fear. He laughed. "Before you said you wanted to go to school." Yuri replied hesitantly, "But now, Dad, I like a normal life. But studying abroad is for later after graduation. I discussed it with your mother and decided that after leaving." He turned away. Yuri realized that her father had discovered something. She opened her mouth to salvage the situation. "Father, This was not a request but an order." His face was serious, his appearance completely different from his polite and elegant appearance from before. "I went to experience the world and then came back." Yuri opened her mouth speechless. "Study abroad, graduate, and marry the guy you choose." The story became more tense with each passing minute. The atmosphere gradually became darker than ever. Yuri's father frowned solemnly. He spoke in a threatening voice. This was not a request, but an order. Faced with such unexpected news, the girl heard it as if she had been struck by lightning, unable to believe this unacceptable reality. But he did not compromise. Yuri's father loudly reminded him, "You should go experience more about the world and then return." Besides, he was a bit hesitant, not wanting to say anything. But the matter was enough. It shocked her completely. Yuri's face turned pale. There was not a drop of blood left on her face. She was stunned and speechless. Seeing that, he immediately added, the old man emphasized the noble task ahead for her. "After studying abroad and graduating, you can marry the boy I choose for you." Yuri sadly sat still, silent, her face darkened without bothering to answer a word. Frustration and discomfort gradually rose in the girl's heart. Scene change. In the middle of a clear morning sky, the beautiful sun is shining warm rays of sunlight on the world. Suddenly from somewhere a familiar voice filled with panic rang out. "Director Zhang, has something happened since this morning?" Inside the neat and tidy office, the lawyer hurriedly ran up. He eagerly asked. "Maybe it wasn't because he remembered that he called me, or maybe you've been causing trouble all night again." In response to those negative words, despite his constant questioning, Tyson still maintained his calm demeanor. He stood silently looking towards the window. Looking somewhere far away. Being a genius, he doesn't easily reveal his flaws. Tyson slowly turned his head. He smiled and said the purpose of today's conversation. "I had a few questions." Hearing that, the lawyer felt relieved. It was as if a burden had been lifted from him. He warmly asked, "Is that so?" "Our director Zhang is so smart. What does he need to ask an ordinary lawyer like me?" A smile gradually appeared on his wrinkled face. Tyson glared sternly and loudly asked the lawyer, "Where was RC?" He was a little scared in such a situation. He couldn't believe his ears and asked again, "RC?" That's right, this was the essential wish when Tyson called him here today. He glanced with authority and emphasized, "Don't talk in general terms, but tell me in detail." It seemed that the name Tyson had just mentioned had a terrible secret that made the lawyer's face pale as soon as he heard it. His eyes widened in shock. He hummed speechlessly. It wasn't until a while later, when he had calmed down a bit, that he awkwardly smiled and awkwardly replied, "To talk in detail about RC, it's a scary place." Hearing this, Tyson was a bit confused. Doubtful at his answer, "What, scary?" Immediately without hesitation, the lawyer frowned, his face filled with seriousness, and immediately affirmed that RC had gone beyond the scope of a normal law office. "Indeed, this is urgent news." Tyson darkly and seriously approached him step by step, skillfully probing. "Do you mean the link between politics and the financial world?" The lawyer seemed to have been hit in the heart. Black, he lost his momentum, tremblingly stepped back to admit that of course there was also something else. Tyson faced this very hot news source. He was shocked and asked. "Something else, yes." The awkward lawyer awkwardly bowed his head and replied. "Although I couldn't say exactly." He seriously recounted the story of the past, the origin of RC, but in the early 1970s, lawyers Lee Yong-moon and Zhang Sunxiao were officially established, although under the form as a law firm, but it is a law firm in a strict organizational form. The lawyer broke out in a cold sweat, turned pale and loudly exposed the unexpected truth. However, the real owners of RC were not those two people, at the same time. He glanced at Tyson with shy eyes full of suspicion. At this point, there was no other way, he asserted eloquently and frankly, but it was senior lawyer Sun Kukyeong. What a source of hot news. Hearing this, Tyson laughed with delight. He happily conjectured that it was the Supreme Court Chief Sun Kukyeong. Indeed, this prediction was unmistakably correct. When the lawyer saw this, he was surprised, and laughed out of the question. "What, you know?" Sure, for a smart person like him, this is just a small thing, but Tyson still wants to hide his strength. He humbly replied with a forced smile, affirming that this is an obvious thing that everyone knows. I'm also a law student. Then, without wasting any more time, the nervous lawyer continued to recount that, according to secret rumors, Sun Kookyong had nominated good lawyers he knew to register for a law office and provide support. There were many of him. At that time, RC had almost no unwinnable case. Once again, his face turned pale and shocked, emphasizing the seriousness of the problem, because Sun Kookyong is the chief of the Supreme Court. If he defends, of course there will be arrangements made. This news was so harsh. Tyson was surprised and shocked to hear it, speechless, his face was blank and bloodless. Stupidly listening to him. The lawyer continued in a loud voice, and Sun Daekyun, son of Judge Sun Kookyong, was the director. Sun Daekyun graduated from law school at Hankook University, and after passing the judicial exam, he became a judge, then became chief judge and then joined RC. Suddenly, a smile appeared on his wrinkled face. The lawyer excitedly smiled at Tyson, but he soon became a director. You probably figured it out, right? The story was so difficult. Tyson was horrified when he heard it. He smiled sheepishly and replied, it seemed like he couldn't touch it. Seeing that he seemed to have become discouraged and frightened by that mysterious force, the lawyer suddenly changed his face and sternly reminded, of course, in fact. My Samu was also destroyed by the many times, so no law office wants to get involved with RC. He emphasized the fatal point with a mocking and critical tone, attacking with strange tactics. Truly speechless, during the whole time he spoke, Tyson listening attentively, his face darkened. He did not open his mouth to say a word. Suddenly, after rearranging the issues, Tyson had a little doubt. If it doesn't work domestically, why not recruit foreign experts? The lawyer, seeing his naivety, laughed and replied, haha, because the fees are very expensive, right? Having understood, Tyson smiled triumphantly. He was sure that Anna's side must have trusted RC, right? The lawyer nodded. Maybe that's why I'm preparing more thoroughly. Speaking of which, the two of you seem to have a better understanding of the plan you're drawing up. Unexpectedly, Tyson smiled. He asked mysteriously, Mr. Lawyer, please help me with this matter. He was shocked and surprised by that sudden thing and asked again, what's wrong with me? That's right, it's him and no one else. The lawyer broke out in a cold sweat. His pale face awkwardly smiled and continued, okay, you just say it, because Director Zhang, even if he jumps into hot water and burns me, do. True to Tyson's wishes, he smiled triumphantly and confided his long-standing plan, we will have to sow the seeds. His words were so difficult to understand that the lawyer laughed foolishly and wondered, what, sprouts, are you planning to grow crops? But things are not just that easy, Tyson thought with a laugh. Lawyer Jove at the time. Everyone has a simple imagination.